and welcome back to another episode of the greatest show in the galaxy, the show where I, the curator, discuss my personal favorite show of all time, personal favorite franchise of all time, Doctor Who. And it's good to be back. I don't know, I've been on a self imposed exile for some reason. I kind of missed all of last month. I hope someone took over the show while I was away, but yeah. I'm back now and I'm here to stay. So I really have legitimately missed my intro opening the episodes. In fact, I almost forgotten how to do the intro of myself. That's why I almost stumbled over my words here. But thankfully, to help ease my transition back into the grand scheme of things, is as per usual a awesome guest that I am so happy that I was able to get this person on for at least one or two or three episodes this week. The wonderful and the lovely and marvelous Marie Wilson. Welcome back to the show,
Hey,
Marie.
thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, I'm very excited to have you here. It's almost as if I haven't seen you in a very long time.
Huh, it is.
Yeah. Full disclosure, we did the Geek Gauntlet early this morning from my point of view. So just in case people weren't clued in onto the hint. Now, as per usual on this show, we start off with the birthday section, so celebrating the birthdays of some of the great people who have contributed greatly to the realm of Doctor Who, both on screen and off. Now, this week was a little in between from the 8th all the way to the 3rd of April. So 20th of March, April 3rd. And yes, I am aware that the episode accidentally dropped on Thursday. So, you know, things happen, but it is what it is. So, for starting us off on the 28th, we have Mr. Gareth David Lloyd. He played the character of Yanto Jones on the Doctor Who spin off show Torchwood, as well as reprising the role for the big Series 4 Doctor Who crossover, the Stolen Earth and Journey's End. And he continues to play that character on the Torchwood main range on Big Finish as well. Also on the 28th, the wonderful Nick Frost, Simon Pegg's other half. He, of course, played Santa Claus in the Peter Capaldi special Last Christmas. And I mean, it's Nick Frost, so come on, you gotta include him on this list at some point. Next, we have on the 29th, Mr. Barry Jackson. He played several different characters. Primarily, he played Ascaris in the Romans. He played Gravy in both The End of Galaxy 4 and Mission to the Unknown, as well as the character Drax in the Armageddon Factor. For those who don't know, the character Drax, a great friend of the Doctor from his Academy days, went rogue and sort of tried to turn on the Doctor. And the character of Drax himself has continuously popped up on Big Finish in various different incarnations with various different actors. On the on the 31st of March, Miss Beth Goddard, also otherwise known as Elizabeth Jane Goddard. She played several different characters. Primarily, she played Sister Helena in Eye of the Gorgon, an episode of the Doctor Who spin-off show, The Sarah Jane Adventures, as well as she continues to play various different characters all throughout the various Big Finish ranges, ranging from the Third Doctor Adventures to the Paternoster Gang, and even the Ravenous series and unit. So she's very, very prominent in the realm of Doctor Who there. On April 1st, before we move on, I just got to bring this up. Ben. Ben Rayner, our good friend from the Multiverse of Geekdom, from Northern Entertainment Group, the Media Sweaties Network. The guy, I would not be here without this guy, and obviously we tragically lost him at the end of last year. This would have been his 36th birthday, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, thank you, Ben. We still miss you. But also on the 1st of February, and this is not an April Fool's joke, the man himself, Sidney Newman, the creator of Doctor Who, the one who commissioned Verity Lambert, the first ever female producer in the BBC, to create this new sci-fi kids show that teaches kids about history. This is the godfather of Doctor Who in many ways. And yeah, he's the originator. He is in many ways the Gene Roddenberry of Doctor Who. The I wouldn't say the George Lucas of Doctor Who, because that's often referred to someone else, but we will get to that as part of the topic of today's show. Also on the first, we have Mr. Well, let me just make sure to get the name right. Mr. John Scott Martin. He was primarily a props character. He was a Zarbi operator in the Web Planet. He was a Dalek operator from The Chase in 1965, all the way up to Remembrance of the Daleks in 1988. So he's been a Dalek for a very long time. He's also played several other characters, including a fungoid, a mechanoid, a robot, and all kinds of other characters that I can honestly sit here and list all the other credits that he done for about 10 minutes. Now, speaking of the Sydney Newman, on April 2nd, which is also my grandmother's birthday, the man, the myth, the legend, Robert Holmes. If Sydney Newman is the Gene Roddenberry of Doctor Who, Robert Holmes, to go back into a Star Wars realm, Robert Holmes is basically the Lawrence Kasdan of Doctor Who. He
Oh.
rejuvenated the entire franchise back in the 70s with the John Pertwee era. So many great creations of Doctor Who have came from the mind of this guy. I mean, he created the hold on. He obviously he created the Crotons, but he also wrote the Space Pirates. He created the Autons, the Drashigs, the Sontarans. He rewrote the entire structure of Gallifrey as it was. He recreated Time Lord Society as we know it. The guy basically was one of the most important creative forces in Doctor Who, still to this day. And on the 3rd of April, Mr. Peter Howell, the composer who redesigned the entire opening titles of Doctor Who back in the 80s for Tom Baker's final season, as well as the first couple of seasons of the Peter Davison, is where he also composed several of the Peter Davison and Tom Baker final series episodes. And now we're on to the last two. On the 3rd of April, we have William Gaunt. He primarily played the character of Orsini in Revelation of the Daleks. Sorry about that. But he also continued to be very much involved with Daleks on Big Finish, playing the character of Celestru in the I think it's the third season of Dalek Empire on Big Finish, and kind of my least favorite of the four, but we're not really going to get into that at the moment. Now, rounding up our list on April 3rd, the OG Nicholas Briggs, Peter Hawkins, the original voice of the Daleks, as well as several other characters. He was also the original voice of the Cybermen, and just as much as we all love Nicholas Briggs, the current voice of the Daleks, he would not be where he is today without the wonderful vocal talents of Peter Hawkins, paving the way from the 1963's The Daleks and onward all the way up to the 10th Planet, which introduced the Cybermen. So from the wonderful, lovely list of people we had today, thank you all. We quite literally could not do this without you. Now, I did mention the names of several iconic robots from the realm of Doctor Who, and that is basically what we will be discussing today. As seen in the image, we will not be talking about the K1 robot, which is on the thumbnail, because honestly, there really isn't that much to say. I only picked a couple of really strong robots with some interesting lore to them, and the ones that I felt were the most memorable, at least from the classic series of the show. Now, for For people wondering, we will not be talking about the Daleks or Cybermen in this episode because they're technically not robots, they are cyborgs. They still have organic parts operating the mechanical bodies. And plus, we also had an entire month dedicated to just Daleks. And I will eventually have an entire month just for the Cybermen once I've been able to figure out their crazy, convoluted timeline. So we'll only be talking about straight up mechanical organisms. Pretty sure
Hmm.
that's a contradiction, but whatever. We will only be talking about strictly mechanical characters from the realm of Doctor Who. Which, first of all, Marie Wilson, outside of
Yep.
Daleks and Cybermen, which I just mentioned, are you in any way familiar with any other robots from Doctor Who, from friends you may know who know are familiar with Doctor Who, or friends or family, anything like that?
No, really the only thing and I mean you're right, they're not actually robots, but the only one I'm really familiar with are the Daleks. I have actually um knitted a washcloth that has a Dalek on it with texture. It has like the bubbles and
Mhm.
everything. It's pretty
That,
cool.
that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
So no other mechanical figures from Doctor Who at all.
Not that I can think of, no.
Okay, cool. So uh, the Daleks themselves were the brainchild of Terry Nation. He's the one I mentioned earlier who repeatedly gets the nickname of the George Lucas of Doctor Who in the way that he furthered the lore. I mean, he pretty much wrote the second ever story, The Daleks. It was a 7-part serial, which went from the end of 1963 to first the early January and 1964. And his creation was just so beloved that not only were they the first villains to make a return to the show, but he kept bringing them back over and over and over and over again to the point where they're just as much as synonymous with Doctor Who as the Doctor themselves. Now, there's always been this weird rights dispute issue between the BBC and the Daleks, in the fact that they technically don't own the Daleks. It's an ongoing issue with many Doctor Who characters that the BBC just doesn't really own the rights to them. And in order
Mm.
for those characters to appear in other Doctor Who related media, there's some deals that need to be struck that I'm not really the smartest person to talk about them at the moment. Hence, the early Peter Cushing Dalek movies were not produced by the BBC, and they kind of sort of did a couple of changes to the Dalek origin. But that's it for the Daleks themselves. The other notable Terry Nation creation that I wanted to bring up today are the Mechanoids. They were
Ooh.
first introduced in the episode that I mentioned earlier, The Chase, which basically the Chase itself, one of my favorites, as a matter of fact. Basically, the Daleks track down the Doctor and friends to this one planet, and they have a time machine of their own all of a sudden, just because apparently it's that easy to make one. So they just start following the Doctor and friends from all kinds of different places. They follow them all the way to 1940s New York. They visit the Empire State Building. They basically land on the Mary Celeste, and that is kind of the Doctor Who explanation of what happened to the crew of the ship. If you're familiar with this, the story of the Mary Celeste, they follow them from one planet to another. They land on this abandoned House of Horror amusement park at some point, and eventually the Doctor and friends lead the Daleks to a planet called Mekanos in, I believe, the 29th century. I'm not 100% sure on the name. Don't quote me on that. But basically, it was a planet that originally was supposed to be colonized by humans, an expedition of humans that landed on this planet to unnamed planet at the time to try and colonize it, but the mission itself was abandoned. The crew themselves left for dead, and the mechanoids were originally created by humans to help terraform the planet itself and help build the human city. And after a while of being abandoned, something just went horribly wrong with their programming, so they turned on their human um, masters. They kept one of them, Stephen Taylor, as a sort of pet in their great city on Mekanos, and they just sort of decided to found their own society on the planet. They became the rulers of the planet, and rather the most dominant species on the planet. Hence, the planet received the name received the name Mechanos after the mechanoids created by the humans, and they built their own cities, they built their own society, their own culture. And as I mentioned, after the Doctor and friends landed on the planet and led the Daleks there, a massive firefight between the Daleks and the mechanoids began, where the mechanoids and the Daleks basically destroyed themselves along with the city itself. As you can see, this sort of this big circle right here at the center of the machine. It's basically a flamethrower. And if you look at on the middle of it, the sides, it's kind of hard to tell from this image, but they're basically claws, or these metal claws. And there's some really cool moments in that episode where some of the mechanoids extend their claws and they just grab the Daleks in a sort of hugging position, preventing them from moving or firing. So the mechanoids have repeatedly shown to be one of the very few races in the universe that can actually match up to the Daleks punch for punch, and they actually the mechanoids themselves were scheduled to return to Doctor Who. Unfortunately, because of how complicated the models themselves are and how incredibly difficult it is to operate them, they keep falling apart. Unlike the Daleks, which are a little easier to operate, they just did not really make a return. They were a complete one-off as far as the TV show realm goes, but the mechanoids themselves have repeatedly made more and more appearance in other media, primarily in a line of comic books that was produced and written entirely by Terry Nation, where he further explored their lore and talked about more. Now you can see the claws a little bit better. He explored more of their lore and how they've repeatedly had clashes with the Daleks over many centuries, and they're one of the few races that actually almost drove the Daleks themselves into extinction. And that apparently the excursion on Mechanos was several years after the fact, but the mechanoids and the Daleks kind of didn't really want to go into another war with the mechanoids, and this whole excursion was a one-off created by a Dalek splinter group who was following the Doctor at the time, and the Daleks sort of the main Dalek leadership, which wasn't really a thing on the TV show at the time, but the Dalek Emperor, for example, he just did not want to go into another war with the mechanoids. Not that they were afraid, because remember, Daleks have no fear. The only emotion that they ever have is hatred, but it was more of a tactical decision rather than a decision out of fear or compassion towards the mechanoids. As far as the mechanoids themselves, as you can see, their design is very 60s. But as far as their culture, even though they're completely mechanical in origin and function, they're highly intelligent, and they even have a strong set concept of beauty. They don't like to conquer, they don't like to kill. They just prefer to admire the universe and observe the beauty of their planet and other planets across the stars. Then they travel the universe not to enslave other people or to kill other people. They just want to explore. They are a race of explorers, and they really just enjoy seeing flowers bloom, or waterfalls falling, or suns rising and setting. So that's really what makes them really unique among other Doctor Who robots. So, is there anything you'd like to add on the topic of these mechanoids?
Yeah, so sizing wise, they're not as big as they look in that one picture, right? Like the picture where it's front and center, it looks huge.
This one, or
that one, but they're
Yeah.
not huge. They're smaller, right? Like that looks smaller.
I think that's more of an artist interpretation, but
Okay.
from my memory, I'm pretty sure they're about the size of a tall human.
Okay.
They're
Gotcha.
not like huge, but they're about human size.
Okay.
Very similar to the Daleks. They might be a little smaller in this picture than they are in the actual show.
Gotcha. Okay. It reminds me of, and I hope I'm getting this right. Um, so the Phasma novel, there is so the planet
Mm,
Parnassus
yeah.
used to be run by a mining company, and the mining company left, but I'm pretty sure it was droids that were left behind that ended up kind of taking over the what was left, but basically the humans like human technologied their way out of existence, and so
Mm,
there
as they
was this
tend to do.
like, yeah, there was this droid like society that kind of took over underground in these mining and laboratory facilities. I think I'm remembering that correctly, but that's what it made me think of.
Yeah, that's a really good example. I have listened to that novel. The main factory that they based themselves in was a clothes making factory, if I remember correctly, or armor making factory. I think that's where Phasma at the end of
Yeah.
the novel goes back and creates her iconic armor
Yes.
from the same
Yes.
from the same metal as Palpatine's ship, if I remember correctly.
Yep. Yep.
That's actually a great comparison. And obviously, that planet has a lot of other societies living on it.
Yeah.
Very similar to Mekanos itself. The planet itself, as you can see, it's very much like the Jetsons, where they have this. They built this city above the planet's surface, almost a city in the clouds. But if you actually go down to the planet's surface, it's infested with these killer vegetation, for lack of a better word. These creatures called fungaloids, these
Oh god.
just giant mushrooms that can walk. Like I said, very 60s. And
I love it.
if you get too close, they just gobble you up and smother you until you're dead. Much like real fungus. But yeah, so I think that's about all we can talk about the mechanoids. So we move on to the next robot.
Sure.
Okay, so the first three robots that I have picked out here are from the first Doctor's era, so 1963 to 1966. And in the third season, actually, there's two robots from the third season, and it's actually one of my favorites, and believe it or not, one of the Doctor's favorites, the Chumleys. Nothing to say.
It's cute.
They're very very cute. They kind of look like, I don't know, the bonbons or something.
Yes.
They look like little bonbons with wheels. So the Chumbleys are basically server robots for an alien race called the Rills from Galaxy 4. They landed on, rather, they were orbiting this planet alongside another race of people called the Dravin. The Rills tried to warn the Dravin about an incoming danger, and the Dravin just opened fire on them with no provocation, and so both spaceships crash landed on the planet's surface. And because the planet itself is really dangerous for the Rills themselves, the Rills have never been able to go outside and explore the planet for themselves. So they used the Chumbleys to roll around the planet and survey the planet on their behalf. These Chumbleys are fitted with neutralizing weapons as well as trap nets to sort of entrap people with them. And in the episode itself, the Dravin show up after the Doctor and friends encounter one of the Chumbleys. They destroy one of the Chumbleys, the Dravins. That is. They destroy one of the Dravins and take the Doctor and friends back to their base camp, to their ship, where they explain to them that this planet doesn't have that long of a time left to exist, because the planet itself, its time is running out. The sun is about to go supernova and destroy the planet, and there's only like a few days left before the episode itself faces extinction, which is why the Dravins need to steal the Rill's ship to escape the planet. They keep one of the Doctor's friends hostage Stephen Taylor, I mentioned earlier in the Mechanoids episode. They keep him hostage while the Doctor and Vicky go to the Rills ship. They follow one of the Chumbleys to the Rills ship and try to negotiate the Rills' surrender to gain access to their ship. Now, the Doctor, being the Doctor, he doesn't really fully trust these Drahvin creatures, and as per usual, he wants to know both sides of the story before making his own assumption. In that way, he discovers from the Rills that it wasn't really the Rills who fired on the Drahvin, like the Drahvin said. It was actually the Drahvin who opened fire on them, forcing them to retaliate. And according to the Drahvins, the Drahvins claimed that one of their Chumbleys killed one of their own, one of the Drahvin, which forced them into this sort of cold war between one another. The Rills then revealed to the Doctor and Vicky that that was impossible because the Rills are pacifist. It is offensive to them to kill anyone else, and it is later then discovered that the leader of the Drahvin, Maga, who's seen here depicted with the darker clothes, Maga basically killed one of her own and blamed it on the Chumbleys and by extension the Rills, all to provoke her people into a war against the Rills. The Doctor then helped the Rills fix their own spaceship. He notified them that the time that the planet itself has left to exist was a lot shorter than they originally believed. And while the Rills, faithful to the last, they wanted a collaboration with the Drahvin, they offered the Drahvin, even after all they've done, they offered them a ride in their spaceship to safety to get off the planet. And the Drahvin, more specifically Maga, refused profusely. She wanted the spaceship for herself and for her people. She was even willing to kill the Rills, which is when the Rills sort of snapped on her, and they just send their Chumbleys to halt the Drahvin outside their spaceship. With a little help from the Doctor. So the Drahvin were kept outside the spaceship and left for dead on the planet, essentially, while the Rills themselves have escaped. And the main primary reason that the Drahvin was so distrustful of the Rills themselves was because of their physical appearance, as seen in this picture right here. The Drahvin are basically these beautiful Amazon women, and the Rills are kind of the opposite of that. The Rills even refused to allow the Doctor and Vicky to look on them because they didn't want them to turn on them just like the Drahvin did. But of course, the Doctor, as he always says, is he does not judge by appearance. He only judges just by their actions, which is why the Rills' actions prompted him to trust them more than he trusts the Drahvin, and so the Rills eventually revealed their proper appearance to him and Vicky. This is what they look like.
Wow.
Which, again, this episode really just goes to show you that don't judge by appearance. Appearances can be deceiving. And the Chumbleys themselves, I actually have a little sound effect of the noise that they make while roaming through the planet. Hold on. If my mouse can work with me here. Boop, 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 boop. So let's see if there's. Oh yeah, and something that I just feel like it's important to bring up is that the Chumbleys, while they haven't had that many appearances on the show off screen, they have recently returned in one of the comic book runs from Titan Comics, where someone was impersonating the Doctor, and in an effort to gain popularity among the people, and he basically passed off the Chumbleys as evil conquerors and basically called them the Daleks. Like he somehow convinced people into thinking that the Chumbleys are actually the Daleks, which the Doctor took issue with, not just because someone was impersonating him, but because he was giving the Chumbleys a bad name.
Yeah.
Which, good for him that for putting the Chumbleys first and his reputation second.
Yeah.
Anything to add? Anything to compare here?
So the the whole story of the back and forth with the Draven and the Rills I thought was really interesting. But with the Chumbleys, so their main thing is like reconnaissance.
Yeah, I forgot the word for it.
Okay, gotcha. So, I mean, there are plenty of droids that do that in Star Wars that collect um sensory data. Like poor R5D4 in The Mandalorian.
Yeah, or that guy can never seem to take a break.
No.
Whether you're talking about Legends or canon.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that's but with there is not like a specific kind of droid really that does that in Star Wars. It's a lot of different ones that are able to, which I'm sure is true in Doctor Who as well. But the the situation between the Draven and the Rills, you were saying like she killed one of her own to blame it on the others. And that made me think of in Bad Batch when I forget his name, but that Imperial officer shoots Orn Free Taa
Mm.
to blame it on Chom Syndulla when he's the one who shot him. Like, and other people saw it. And then later he's like, no, you didn't see it that way. And if you do think you saw it that way, you're dead. And it was just like, bad times.
Yeah, politics. Am I right? It's basically what it is. It's fake news propaganda.
Yeah. Yeah.
A attempted assassination for the sake of promoting one's uh, political power on the planet, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. And speaking of politics, let's move on to the final William Hartnell era robot. And as goofy as it is one of my favorites. It's the War Machines. From the episode The War Machines, the season finale of season 3. So in this episode, the Doctor and his companion at the time, Dodo, which is short for Dorothea, by the way, because some people get a little weird when I mention Dodo's name. But so him and Dodo land on 1960s London, and they go back to visit the newly constructed post tower in the city of London, where they discover this brand new supercomputer called Voton, who can calculate any issue that anyone poses to him, and has also revealed to have intelligence far beyond anything regular on Earth. Until the computer develops a mind of his own, and please stop me if you've heard this before, decides humans are obsolete and mechanical life is superior, and they're the ones that should be the dominant species on the planet. Sound familiar?
Yes.
So basically, he starts mind controlling and hypnotizing all the humans who work in the post office and at the top floor of the building, and forces them to grab materials to construct these war machines to help take over London, which then led to massive clashes between these war machines and the British military in the city, where the Doctor eventually realizes that their programming is kind of incomplete, and with the help of the Doctor and new companion Ben Jackson, he helps the military, captures one of these war machines, and then he helps reprogram them to basically form an assault on the post office building and take down Voton himself. I should say. And also in the process, one of the Doctor's main companions, Dodo, uh, has her brain wiped by Voton, and that is really kind of her unceremonious departure from the show, where she just went to the countryside to heal after the Doctor de-brainwashed her, and just decided to stay. So it's a really weird departure for a companion, but thankfully it gained us two, in my opinion, two really good companions in the form of Ben Jackson and Polly Wright. But as seen from these images, basically they're kind of misshapen with uh, some of the elements that the humans had to work with at the time, both in the episode itself and off screen. They kind of see that they have this little sort of grinder wheel at the bottom. They have these two hammer-like arms that they very clumsily lift and smash things with, and these two side guns, which basically fire some weird gaseous substance that suffocates the humans, and then they run them over with the wheel at the bottom. But at the back, there's this sort of computery looking thing that controls the robot and the war machine themselves. And there's this big antenna at the top, which is how they're still connected to Voton from across great distances. Now, real world implications here. The main episode was kind of conceived by an idea from Kit Pedler, who 2 episodes later eventually created the Cybermen. And the main reason he wanted to do this, he wrote this episode the way that he did, was because the newly constructed postal office in the city of London was bothering him when he was looking out through his apartment window into the London skyline. That's kind of the main reason why he wanted to portray the post office as the main villains there, because it was interfering with his field of vision when he was looking out from his window. Kind of silly, but made a good story out of it, so I can't really
I
complain.
think that's awesome.
So, anything to add on the crazy, goofy design of these things?
So if you can see
Oh,
that.
I see where you're going with it. That's
Yeah.
ATT
AAT.
AAT. Sorry, my bad. I was close.
Yeah, the AAT separatist droid tank. That was the immediate thing. I started searching on my phone and I'm like, what is this thing called? I couldn't remember right off the top of my head, but I found it. But that imagery is very similar, with like the kind of chunky middle and then the two
the two
things
guns at
sticking
the side.
out, and yeah, like kind of um the like skirt around the outside.
Mhm.
It's very similar to the AAT. And the AAT is a war machine. So
Yeah, it's kind of an APC for the separatists, if I remember correct. No. It's no that's something else. That's something else that I can't remember the name of. The thing in from we see it in Phantom Menace that it just holds this massive sleeve with battle droids on each sides and deploys them. What's that called?
yeah, oh gosh.
Sorry to put you on the spot. Here.
It's fine. My some of my like off the top of my head trivia knowledge has dissipated in favor of epidemiological study designs recently, so it's I do what
Priorities,
I
right?
can. Um what is that thing? Cuz it's not the NR99. It's I can't think of it.
I honestly don't even know how to look for something like that. How to search for the name. But in an effort
Okay,
to
multi-troop transport.
okay, the- it was annoyingly obvious. It was staring
I
at
know,
the
right?
face. So
Yeah. This thing.
yes, yeah, it's got the arm with the battle droids on it.
Yeah.
Cool. So so that's it for the first Doctor. We do have two robots from the second Doctor, and two robots from the fourth, and one from the fifth. So let's move on to the second Doctor. Arguably one of the most iconic ones, the Yeti.
I'm just
Oh,
gonna say right off, I love this. This is ridiculous, and I love it. Continue.
yeah, I love it too. When a couple of years ago, when we did a Doctor Who tier ranking list of the villains, I brought up the Yeti, and it was I was doing it with Frenchie at the time, Lou from
Yeah.
the Benverse and Northern Entertainment Group, and I was like, I was getting so excited and hyped up to talk about it, and I was like, so now we have the Yeti. It was and I was starting my description of the creature, and it was like, what the fuck is that? And you can physically hear all the air coming out of my sails as soon as he says that. But so the Yeti were a creation of the Great Intelligence, a legendary status villain in Doctor Who, that they first appeared in the episode The Abominable Snowman, fitting, where the
Yeah.
Doctor and friends landed in Tibet in 1938. I believe they landed in the Himalayas. They they made their way into a Tibetan monastery that worships these Yetis, and as a great helper that sort of helps them from time to time. And apparently, at the time that the Doctor landed, the Yeti have sort of turned on these Tibetan monks and started attacking them rather than helping them. While in the meantime, there's this British explorer, Professor Travers, who traveled to the Himalayas in the hopes of finding one of these Yetis and bringing a specimen back to Britain to prove that one such creature exists, because that's what British do, especially at the time. And while the Doctor and friends were playing host to, or the playing guest at the monastery, they discovered that these Yetis aren't really all that they seem. They're not these giant lumbering furry creatures that they thought they saw. This is a picture from another episode, so there's no image of the Himalayan mountains, but they were actually secretly controlled by these small silver orbs inserted into the back of the robot itself, and they were sort of acted as a homing beacon once removed, and they were controlled by a separate intelligence called the Great Intelligence, and the Great Intelligence had prior knowledge of the Doctor for a reason that was yet to be explained. The intelligence was aware of the Doctor, even though the Doctor was not aware of the intelligence at the time. And once removed, these silver orbs made a sort of homing sound when they had this desire to return back to their to one of the Yeti creatures that they belong to. This is a sample of what that sound sounded like. So basically, the sound itself has two different versions. This is one, and this is the other. And basically, when the Yetis were on the march, they typically made both those noises together, like so. It's one of my favorite sound effects from classic Doctor Who. But
Yeah.
originally, there were only a couple of Yetis, and I apologize. I thought I had it here. I couldn't find. Or rather, I thought I had images of what they originally looked like in the episode themselves, but they eventually made a reappearance later in the same season, about 40 years later, with a older Professor Travers in London, where the Yetis themselves got a massive redesign in the form of having these eyes and the mouth that you see here, and a group of them took over the London Underground and essentially terrorized the city of London, driving the people away forcing the military to act, which was how the Doctor first came into contact with Colonel Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart, which later became the Brigadier, one of the Doctor's closest and dearest friends in later years. Here's a picture of companions Zoe and Jamie with a small pyramid of these silver orbs that the intelligence used to control the Yeti. This is another image of a pyramid which housed the brain of the intelligence itself, where in The Web of Fear, the follow-up episode to that, the Doctor tried to the intelligence had a plan to absorb the Doctor's mind into her own and added his knowledge to that entity, where the Doctor flipped the switch on it and attempted to absorb the intelligence to his mind and safely dispose of it at a safe distance. But unfortunately, he did something that the Doctor is notorious for doing, which is not telling anyone else about his plan. And so when his friends attacked the intelligence and broke the pyramid, thinking that the intelligence was about to attack the Doctor, the intelligence just dissipated and stuck around without the Doctor being able to dispose of it. Mm-hmm. Here's another image of the Yeti in the Himalayas. Now, in more modern times, the origin of the Great Intelligence was explored. The intelligence basically came in from presumably from another universe. It survived the destruction of its own universe and made it into our universe via the Big Bang. Landed on the planet Earth in the 1840s, if I remember correctly. Attached itself into a small child called Abe Simeon, if I remember correctly. I just remember Simeon, and when the child grew older into a cold and unassuming Richard E. Grant character, he basically manifested the intelligence basically manifested themselves in these human-sized snowmen with real teeth who went after people and had the voice of Ian McKellen for some reason, and that was really when the intelligence first came into contact with the Doctor in the 1890s, the 11th Doctor version, the Matt Smith variant. Eventually, the surprise, it was the intelligence was stopped by none other than Clara Oswald. Not getting into that conversation again, but that was really where the intelligence became aware of the Doctor. And because it's been several centuries removed from this incarnation of the Doctor is more or less forgotten about the Great Intelligence. However, the intelligence remembered the Doctor, and only a few scant decades later, they crossed paths again, except this time the Doctor was in a much earlier incarnation, while the Great Intelligence was still relatively new to this great threat of the Doctor, which is how it was aware of the Doctor back in the 1960s without the Doctor being aware of it. The Great Intelligence did a lot of other stuff later, but none of that really has anything to do with the Yetis themselves. So you said you liked the design of the Yeti. Anything else you'd like to add on these things?
These are so weird. They're so cool. Do they all, because that one, the drawn image has claws.
This one?
So do they all have claws like that?
Yeah, hold on. It's hard to see in this image.
Yeah.
The image that I thought I had, and apparently now I can't find it, it shows a really good picture. Hold on, let me see if I can find it, because it's a bit weird that I can't find the image. But yeah, they all had these claws, and by the time that The Web of Fear came around, which is the follow-up episode to The Abominable Snowman, they also were equipped with these web guns that basically fired cobwebs at their target, basically ensnaring people or cars or whatever in a giant cocoon, preventing them from moving. This is the image that I thought I had. This is what they originally looked like before they got the redesign with the face on it.
Wow,
and
this is something else.
Yeah, and this is the image that Frenchie saw and was like, "What the fuck is this?" Now you can understand him a bit better. Um, anything from Star Wars you'd like to compare it to, like robots with fur on them? Is
I
that a
don't.
thing?
Can you think of one?
Not me. That's why I asked you. You're the
Yeah,
expert.
I am trying, but I mean there are plenty of weird aliens with fur like that, but not robots, not droids that
How
I
about
can think of.
robots that are controlled by an exterior force that
Yeah.
an non-physical intelligent force? Is that a thing in some corner of the Star Wars realm?
Well, I mean, I guess you sort of have it's still a physical thing, but the battle droids that are controlled by the central computer. And
True.
then when it gets shut down, the battle droids all shut down.
Yeah.
So kind of like a network of
I thought,
controlling from one central location.
yeah, not really the best battle tactic when using battle droids, but I never
Yeah.
really understood people's beef with the whole idea that once the ship was destroyed, all the battle droids shut down. Like, what did you expect? That's how it works.
Yeah, yeah.
People just took it in the wrong direction. I think.
Yeah. It makes sense to me.
Me too. So, doesn't really make sense in the Avengers when they blow up the ship and all the Chitauri fall because they're not robots, but it makes sense for the battle droids.
Yeah. 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 And it saves them from having to make the droids intelligent
Yeah,
because if they don't have to expend resources on making the droids intelligent, then they can expend their resources on making the central computer intelligent or using human or not humans necessarily, but organics to run the central computer. So resource wise, it makes sense.
yeah, because I don't know if you're aware, but intelligent robots aren't really a good thing, right? And we saw
Yeah.
and we saw what happened when they made the battle droids too intelligent in Clone Wars, and I suppose in Rebels as well. That one episode of Rebels where the battle droids stuck around for some reason.
On is that Agamar? I think it's
I
Agamar.
I have no idea. I just remember really liking that episode a
Yeah,
lot.
where the tactical droid is thinking that they're still at war.
Yeah. That
Yeah,
one.
that's a good episode.
It's like they feel like the war hasn't ended because no one updated them too much.
Right. It's so sad. They're
Yeah,
like,
it was really cool to see Kanan and Rex finally fighting side by side as comrades as opposed to just being adversaries for once.
absolutely.
I love Rex. Rex and Kanan are some of my favorite characters from Star Wars canon.
They're pretty great.
Yeah.
I agree.
Moving
But
on
yeah,
to
I
the
think
art.
it's Agamar.
Do you want to look it up while I bring up the next robot?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next robot on our list, also from the second Doctor's era, one of my favorites and one I wish they bring back on the show at some point, the Quarks.
Ooh.
I absolutely love the Quarks. Love me some Quarks. Not to be confused with Quark from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. They're, surprise, surprise, once again, reconnaissance and security robots working for uh, humanoid masters called the Dominators. The Dominators are a massive empire spanning allegedly 10 galaxies, where they basically they run around these 10 galaxies, land, and exploit the resources and people of said planet that they conquer, and move on and use that all those resources to help fuel their mighty galaxy-spanning empire. Any planet that they feel could be a threat, they send in the Quarks, who are both reconnaissance robots as well as walking weapons, and they basically destroy the what they consider to be the lesser population of the planet itself. Here is a close up of their heads, and here's several of them walking, rather standing on a hill. This is what one of the Dominators look like. This is Dominator Toba, and the other Dominator Rago. Basically, they have a really weird tablet shaped uniform on it. But I'm not the biggest fan of the Dominators, but if having the Dominators in a Doctor Who story means that they bring the Quarks with them, bring it to me. Like I'll eat it up. I love the way that they look like, and I love the way that they speak. Hold on, I also have a clip here.
Shall we destroy? Shall we destroy?
They have such a cute voice. It's
I know.
weird. Yeah, it's weird how something so adorable can be so destructive, which is kind of Doctor Who's modus operandi. I always say that some of the best Doctor Who monsters are the ones that are able to find the right balance between scary and goofy. Part of the reason why the Daleks have endured the way that they have,
Yeah.
like just looking at them, they don't look very threatening, but as soon as they start talking, they start killing, when you realize that they're literally based on Nazis, that's pretty scary and horrifying.
Yeah.
And that's really one of the main things that make Doctor Who monsters so iconic. The best ones, well, some of them are just plain scary, some of them are just plain goofy, but the best ones, in my opinion, or in other words, the Robert Holmes philosophy of making Doctor Who monsters, this guy that we mentioned earlier, is just trying to find the balance between scary and comedic at the same time. And I think the Quarks really treads that balance perfectly. I mean, they're as seen in this picture, they're not particularly tall. They don't look very threatening until they whip out their weapons in their arms and start literally evaporating people by shooting at them. And they have this really cute voice, and the fact that they're kind of henchmen. They're not like conquerors. They just do what they're told by species that considers themselves to be superior to all the races. And yeah, obviously the blocky design would probably have to have some modifications if the Quarks themselves were ever to return on the show. But yeah. The episode itself is not great, but I love the Quarks in it, so can't really complain too much about that. That's really kind of my problem with a lot of some of these robots and monsters, is that they got really great design and great characteristics. Just the story of itself could have been done a lot better. But anything you want to say about the Quarks?
Well, you were talking about that mix between goofy and scary. One of the Doctor Who, I guess, villains that sticks out to me in that regard is the adipose fat.
Yeah.
Because they are so cute, but holy moly, that's terrifying. Like,
they're literally made of human fat. And I don't know if you've seen the episode, but we usually see a woman reduced to nothing but these things. That's horrifying.
It is horrifying, but they're so cute.
Yeah, and
I want a Funko Pop of the adipose fat so bad.
You know what? I can look up if there is one. I don't think they made one, but they probably did, because Funko Pops does stuff for everything. But again, that balance. A second and a half after you've seen a living woman reduced into these things, we see one of them jumping out a window, looking like,
yeah. It's creepy, but they have the cute little faces. It's just like,
they're so cute, and you just can't be mad at them. This is another sample of what the Quarks sound like. So this is kind of where they prime their weapons, as opposed to the speaking role that we
Yeah.
heard earlier from the voice of uh, Sheila Grant, I believe, was the voice actress. Unlike Peter Hawkins and Roy Skeleton, some of these robots and monsters had like one-off people making their voices. It's not like today where most of the voices are primarily done by one guy, the great Nicholas Briggs. So at the time, it was either Roy Skeleton or Peter Hawkins for Daleks, Cybermen, and several other creatures. But from a lot of these robots and other monsters, they just got one-off people to do the voices. I believe can't remember the name of the actress who also voiced the Mechanoids, but it was and I probably should have thought ahead and had a sound effect for what the Mechanoids used to sound like, but it was even more choppy sounding than the Daleks. If you can, it was like someone with laryngitis speaking. Well, one of these I'll find a clip of what the Mechanoids used to sound like. But now we're moving on to the fourth Doctor. We're kind of skipping the third Doctor because didn't have that many memorable robots during his 5-year run. But the same cannot be said about the fourth Doctor, because we're going to talk about arguably the most iconic species of robots from Doctor Who, the Kaldor androids. These robots are so iconic, they even have their own spin-off series on Big Finish. Right now, I believe they're on their 6th box set, if I remember correctly. A box set, basically, you can kind of think of it as like a season, but it's only like three to 4 episodes that are about an hour long. So basically, on the human colony city of Kaldor, the humans have developed these robots to basically help do all the menial tasks that the humans were too lazy to do themselves. Mining and machinery maintenance and sanitation and all kinds of other things to basically maintain the human, a part of the human empire. The Kaldor androids themselves are basically separated into 3 primary models: the D's, which stands for dumb, the V's, which stands for Vox, and the SVs, which stands for Super Vox. The dumbs, as you can guess, first of all, they're colored black, and they're the lowest class. Symbolism, right?
Yeah.
They're the lower class of the Kaldor androids. They're basically mute. They lack the ability to speak, and they're basically doing the lowest class stuff that most of these models of robots do. The Vox are a little bit higher up on the hierarchy. They have more interactions with the humans themselves. They tend to more being a sort of servant / butlery role, and they also have the ability to speak. The SVs, or Super Vox as they're called, are basically the ones in charge of all the other Vox and the dumbs in any given place. There's usually only one. Typically, there's only one Super Vox for every factory, city, ship, land cruiser, whatever, that really is the one in charge of all the other androids in that particular division. Now, when the Doctor and companion Leela landed on one of these sort of land cruisers filled with humans and Vox, a virus was developing among the Vox that I could have shown you if the GIFs weren't too large to appear on StreamYard, so I apologize for that. But the Vox were clearly coming down with something involving these red eyes that made all these the Vox specifically turn on their human overlords and kill them, primarily through the act of strangling. There was a dissension among the ranks, and the humans started to believe that these Vox were not to be trusted, until it was eventually revealed that the person in charge of or the responsible for this uprising was actually on the ship the whole time, a self-proclaimed terrorist by the name of Terran Capel, who, as seen in this picture also, has while he was human, he considered himself to be to be a lot closer to Vox themselves, and he actually modeled his image based on the images of the Vox themselves, and he's the one that injected all the Vox with a virus to try and help the fuel the uprising. Part of his plan was to make the humans see that these Vox can't be trusted, so that they would throw them away, and by extension, the Vox would be left on their own to carry on the fight for themselves. And that is probably the main reason why they got their own spin-off series that so far has lasted for 6 series, or box sets, I should say, is that some humans still trust them. Some humans have grown to realize that what they've done to these robots is inhumane and immoral, and that these robots deserve to have rights of their own. Some believe that they should be destroyed. It really is. It started a political movement from separate humans who want these Vox destroyed, and other humans who want these Vox to be liberated. All thanks to this guy stirring up the fire, and of course, the doctor helped put him out of the way, essentially, and he, as he usually tends to do, he left the humans to figure this whole situation out by themselves, because as the doctor always says, he always tries to help wherever he can. He cannot stay permanently and help people figure out their own problems. The human race has to figure out some of its own problems on their own. So that's it for these Keldo robots, the Vox, as they're usually called. While I had this picture on, you went off camera to grab something. What did you bring?
Last Shot. This book goes into Phison Gore, who is a Pau'an who, I forget the name of let's see if it has it in here. So Phison Gore is a Pau'an that tries to turn all the droids in the galaxy against the organics. And and thinks that like droids are highly superior to organics, and that and he does like adds like organic body parts to some of it. Is the most disturbing book at times, with the adding of organic body parts to droids, and it's like, what is happening? This is so weird. But this book is really good. It's like back in the day with Lando and Han, and then current.
Yeah, that's the
Lando
one
and
that
Han,
exists in
older
3
Lando and Han.
timeline. That's the one where we
Yeah.
see young Han and Kira, old Han and old Lando, and middle Lando with L3. That's right. Am I correct on this?
Yes.
Or is that a different
So
book?
it's Lando L3. I believe it's Han and Sana Staros.
Oh, yeah. Now I remember.
Yeah. And it so, and that's the only thing that I don't like about this book, is the fact that Han and so Han's always making moves on Sana, and Sana never says, "Look, I'm into girls." Like that always gets to me, because in the Dr. Aphra series, Sana clearly is into girls. Now maybe she's, bi, I don't know, but she never rebuffs Han at all. She's just kind of like, lay off. And I'm like, girl.
Maybe this could be another option. What if because she got so fed up with Han hating on her, that's how she decided she was more into girls?
Maybe, because he's very like overbearing with it.
Like
So
I mean, as we are all familiar with the character of Han Solo,
yeah,
he could come off pretty strong at times. It kind of reminds me of after George Costanza's girlfriend Susan left him. She she became a lesbian, and he's like, she hated me so much that she decided to become a lesbian, and then her girlfriend at the time started dating Kramer, and that's when she went back to George. Maybe I'm misremembering that, but like I drive him to lesbianism, and he drives them back. Like a classic George Costanza moment.
That's funny. I wish
So-
I could remember the name of the thing, but I can't find it. The Phalanx Redux transmitter.
Yeah, I remember it was something with 3 words, but I couldn't remember for the life of me what it was called.
Yeah, so like it even turned the calf maker evil. Like it turned everything against organics. It
It's
is a
it's like
crazy book.
it was like the Allspark from the first Transformers movie, where it turned a cell phone evil. It turned a Mountain Dew machine, because product placement. A Mountain Dew machine turned evil in that
Yeah.
movie. But doesn't that
So
book also include like a scene with like older Han and a baby baby Ben Solo, or is that a different book?
no, I think that's in here. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
there's a lot. There's so many timelines and so many different things that go on in this book. Whoops.
Whoop.
It's super complicated and super disturbing, but so good.
As we always say around this show, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. Now, are you ready for the most iconic Doctor Who robot of all time?
Yes.
Well, I think what you should have said was affirmative. Say hello to K9.
Oh,
Can you guess where the name comes from?
yes.
Yeah, that's
Very
a bit
much
on
so
the
looks
nose.
like a dog.
Yeah, so K9 was first introduced in the Invisible Enemy in 1977, if I remember correctly, around the time of A New Hope, where this medical doctor who lived on Earth was called to work on this space station orbiting Earth, and because of weird vaccination laws, he couldn't bring his own dog to the space station. So when he eventually traveled to the space station itself, he built his own robot dog with a living computer in its main chest, and sort of used it as a medical companion for himself, helping him out with all kinds of medical procedures. He's an analyzer. He can analyze any substance and give full-on descriptions of the composition of any substance that is attached to this. I don't know if you can see it from this picture or this picture, but he's got this little small dart on the forehead between the eyes. This little
Yes.
tiny round dish. So yeah, he uses it to scan the area and analyze it. He also has a laser gun at the mouth/nose, and some computery things at the back. Now, following the crisis of the nucleus of the storm on the space station, that doctor, which I apologize, I'm misremembering the name at the moment, was called back to Earth, and as a result, he was told he could not take his new mechanical dog to Earth. So he suggested the Doctor would take it as a traveling companion with him and Leela. So he actually went back to Earth and revisited his real dog on the planet's surface. Now, there originally were 2 endings to that episode, because the producers and showrunners weren't really 100% sure how the public would respond to the character of K9. So they had these 2 endings: one where that medical doctor took the robot dog, back with him, and one where he gave it to the Doctor as a traveling companion. And once the responses for K9 were overwhelmingly positive, the Doctor kept him, and he actually stuck around for longer than most human companions on the show.
Oh, wow.
Stayed on for almost 3 full seasons up until that point, traveling with both the 4th Doctor and Leela, as well as 2 different incarnations of Romana, before eventually Romana decided to stay in East Space at the end of Tom Baker's final season and help free the Thorels, who were kept as slaves and workforces. And the Doctor just gave her K9 and tell her that he would help her liberate the Thorels in East Space. And eventually in time, both this Romana and K9 went back to the main universe, or rather End Space. And there was kind of a situation where there were 2 K9s. So trying to oversimplify things because we're kind of running out of time here. So the K9 Mark 1, to be specific, where which was originally constructed by that medical doctor on the space station, was traveling with the 4th Doctor and companion Leela until the 4th Doctor was called back to Gallifrey to help solve this, to uncover a plot by the Sontarans to take over the planet, where K9 and Leela played a massive part of it. But during the brief occupation by the Sontarans, Leela fell in love with a Time Lord named Andred and decided to stay on the planet, and K9 decided to stay with her on Gallifrey, the Doctor's home planet, to look after her. And after entering the TARDIS, the Doctor, for the majority of that season, showing great disdain and disgust at the very mention of K9, because he did not want a robot dog to begin with. It was mainly just Leela's pet. The Doctor brings up a giant crate that just says K9 Mark II on it and fires up a brand new model that he constructed while K9 was on the ship. So clearly even though he didn't show it, he started really liking this particular robot also, to the point where he built a replacement just in case the robot decided to leave at some point or another. And the K9 Mark II, this is another image of K9 Mark I, by the way, him playing chess with the Doctor. But so the K9 Mark II stayed with the 4th Doctor all throughout the first Key to Time crisis with the first incarnation of Romana, and stuck around with the second incarnation of Romana, and this is again where real life stuff kind of gets in the way. The main voice actor, John Leeson, decided to drop out of the show and pursue other interests, such as a movie career, which didn't really go all that well. But they brought in a secondary actor, David Brierley, in K9's 3rd season. So K9's voice was kind of a no-show for the first couple of episodes in that season, where they brought, and then after that he regained his voice with the voice of David Brierley, where they explained away that he suffered robotic laryngitis, which is the reason for the changing of the voice. And then obviously by the end of that season, which famously ended with the infamously unproduced episode Shada, John Leeson came back for K9's final season with really no explanation as to how K9 got his original voice back. They just ran with it.
Nice.
And shortly after K9's departure in Warrior's Gate, there was this massive uprising from the fans and massive backlash. Nothing at all compared to what it is today, but I'm talking about like fan letters and fan requests and petitions to bring the character back, which kind of really put the Doctor Who producers at a bit of a tight spot, I should say. So they started bringing the character back through the novels and T-shirts and other promotional material, most really kid-friendly novels. On a separate series of just K9 novels, but that clearly wasn't enough for some people, so they just brought the character back through a planned spin-off called K9 and Company, which saw the legendary companion Sarah Jane Smith, my personal favorite companion, making a return to the Doctor Who universe, and the Doctor sends a present to her Aunt Lavinia, which eventually made it back to her. And that present was K9 Mark III. So, just to catch up, K9 Mark I stayed on Gallifrey with Leela. K9 Mark II, not sure that this is the K9 Mark II, but K9 Mark II was in E-space with Romana. K9 Mark III was on Earth with Sarah Jane in contemporary time. Eventually, over time, Romana made her way back to End Space and brought her K9 back with her, became the president of Gallifrey. And so there were two K9s, one that was a presidential helper of Romana, which was the K9 Mark II. K9 Mark I was a companion of Leela, who eventually became the presidential bodyguard of President Romana. And the two K9s kept butting heads with each other, and they kept one-upping each other and calling themselves the K9 Mark II, continued to call the Mark I the inferior K9 unit, while the Mark I, begrudgingly, with a disdain in his voice, as much as his robot voice can do, this called the Mark II the superior K9 unit. And as for the Mark III, eventually, after many years of being with Sarah Jane, the K9 Mark III broke down until the 10th Doctor, the David Tennant version specifically, was reunited with Sarah Jane Smith and repaired the K9 Mark III for a brief moment before the Mark III sacrificed itself by shooting at krillitane oil to blow up a school filled with krillitanes in an attempt to stop them from cracking the Scasis paradigm, the God-maker formula of the universe. The K9 Mark III did not survive the explosion of the school. However, before leaving, the Doctor left Sarah Jane one final gift, the K9 Mark IV, which led into another spin-off. First of all, the attempted spin-off K9 Company did not do well. We have an entire episode on this show, me and Stern Snark, just talking about how bad the pilot episode was. Like, it's a journalist and a robot dog in a small town village fighting Satanists. Like, seriously, it's even if you're not a Doctor Who fan, it's worth a watch. Like, it's pretty wild. So yeah, that pilot very quickly fell by the wayside, and the character itself only made one further appearance in the 20th anniversary special, The Five Doctors. He only showed up for like a hot second, just to show that episode was canon, that Sarah Jane did still have the K9 Mark III. Another version of K9 made an appearance in the 30th anniversary special, Dimensions in Time. We do not talk about Dimensions in Time, but the character character stuff was a no-show on the Sarah Jane Smith Big Finish series of audios that predated her return to the main show. That was when the K9 Mark III resurfaced on the show, only for that one episode to get himself blown up, and the Doctor introduced the K9 Mark IV, which continued on with the Sarah Jane into her own spin-off, this time one that actually succeeded, called the Sarah Jane Adventures, where unfortunately, because once again, I mentioned this in this episode as well, really weird rights issues with some of the Doctor Who characters. The character of K9 was meant to appear on the Sarah Jane Adventures, but because they couldn't really work the rights properly, he only made cameo appearances all throughout the first two seasons, and they wrote it into the story that he was sent through a portal to another part of the universe to use force fields to hold back a black hole from consuming planet Earth. Now, but this, again, behind the scenes stuff around the same time, Bob Baker, the original creator of K9, not the professor, the medical doctor from the episode, the real world creator of Bob Baker of K9, was lobbying around the option of a K9 centered show simply titled K9, but no other production company wanted to take the rights for that series, fearing it would fail, until he only one production company in BBC Australia decided to distribute that show with a radical redesign of K9 that still kind of upsets me till this very day, which looks like this. Yeah, a flying K9, still has the voice of John Leeson, so that's really the only credibility I would say the show has. But overall, the show itself makes little to no effort to connect itself to the main Doctor Who universe, and the
Mm.
main Doctor Who universe is so far, at least as far as I know, have not made any connections to this the existence of that show. But because that show itself only ran for one season, the rights dispute between the character of K9 and the BBC was eventually resolved, and the character of K9 Mark 4 was brought into the Sarah Jane Adventures universe full time, and they explained it away by basically saying there was a sentient ship that eats black holes as its main source of fuel. Something that probably could only happen in the Doctor Who universe, but she basically ate the black hole that K9 was guarding, and so K9 eventually made his proper permanent stay on the Sarah Jane Adventures show, even being reunited with the 10th Doctor when the 10th Doctor appeared in one of the episodes of that very same season. And just like the K9 Mark 1, K9 Mark 2 on Gallifrey, K9 repeatedly took jabs at the main supercomputer in the wall of Sarah Jane's house, Mr. Smith. More on him in another episode. But yeah, so unfortunately, the K9 Mark 1 was destroyed on Gallifrey during the Time Lord Civil War, and the K9 Mark 2 was destroyed while defending his friends from Daleks in the Axis, which one of the many instances which eventually led to the last Great Time War. And the fourth K9 stuck around with Sarah Jane's son Luke when he eventually transferred over to, I can't remember if it was America, but it was a different country to study abroad, which again, real world implications here. Tommy Knight's, the actor Tommy Knight's real world education influenced him to appear on the show less, only appearing once an episode via Zoom calls for the last 2 seasons before eventually making his return in the final episode alongside his new adopted sister Sky, which curiously disappears from the Doctor Who canon after that point. No idea what happened there, but in the 2020 webcast Farewell Sarah Jane, to basically say goodbye to the character of Sarah Jane 9 years after the passing of Elizabeth Sladen, the actress who played the character, it was revealed that the K9 Mark 4, who was at the funeral service for Sarah Jane, went with Ace, another legendary companion of the Doctor. And basically, as far as some of the Doctor Who canon is concerned, K9 Mark 4, the only last surviving K9, of course, if you don't count this abomination, is with Ace in her charity focused business, A Charitable Earth, which curiously both that charity organization and K9 were left out of the most recent episode, The Power of the Doctor, which featured Ace's proper return to the show after 43 years off the show.
Oof.
I don't know, math can get crazy sometimes. 1989 to 2022, how long is that?
So
I think it might be 33.
33-ish.
Yeah, so after 33 years, well, again, unless you count Dimensions in Time, which I already said we're not talking about, that was really the law of the absence that Ace had from the show. But yeah, Sophie Eldred reprised the role of Ace on the show, and K9 mysteriously absent. But with Russell T Davies back at the helm, who also wrote the Farewell to Sarah Jane Smith, we might actually see K9 and Ace again. Who knows? Only time will tell. But obviously, the character of K9 has so many facets to it. We can spend an entire episode just talking about this one character. What have you to say about everyone's favorite mechanical dog?
So I just want to compare him to, from a certain point of view, A New Hope collection of 40 short stories of MSC6 and Men. So the mouse droid that has racing stripes that is basically the companion of this stormtrooper, and it's super cute, and the whole story is written from the perspective of the mouse droid. At least most it's like it it is written in like code, and
Hmm.
then it's like the owner did this, and then the droid lost a lot of time, and because the droid's brain keeps getting erased to
Hmm.
hide an affair that the stormtrooper's having, and it is so good. Like, this droid goes through so much and is just like a little companion to the stormtrooper, and the stormtrooper is always like, TK4 TK421, I think, is the stormtrooper.
The one who
Um,
was in it as post.
yes. Yes. So, the so this stormtrooper gets killed by Luke. So,
Yeah.
it's really
On the
sad. It's really sad, and the officer who he's having an affair with decides to take the take MSC6 with him to the because they're on the Death Star, to the main room, the bridge of the Death Star, to watch the attack on the rebels. And he's like, this is for, for
TK41.
him, for
Wow.
TK41. And so the droid is very well respected by both the TK421 and the officer he was having an affair with. So, like, he knew how much the droid meant to him, and he would always talk about, "Oh, I'm going to take you to the races one day and you're going to win." And like, it's just so cute.
Ah, that's honestly kind of sad. I was hoping. I listened to that audiobook. I don't remember much from it. Well, I don't remember some of it, but I don't remember that one specifically. But when you mentioned he took the MC droid, I was hoping you'd say that they went off the Death Star because I mean we kind of know what happens
Yeah.
next.
It's
So
the
that
whole story, like, it's cute, and you're like, "Oh, this is so precious." And then it's like, "Oh,
oh
they're
oh
all dead now." Like, it's pretty sad in the end, but it is a very sweet story.
yeah, and that's I think one of the many things that the Star Wars novels did great is that it humanizes all the Imperials who were on the Death Star before it blew up.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget in Lost Stars when obviously when they see the planet Alderaan blow up, some of these people had friends and family on Alderaan,
Yeah.
and that there was that one officer that was like he was blanking, like he couldn't speak, he couldn't walk for a while after it, and he took it really hard. And then some of the other officers will we get to know in the story, some of their friends died when the Death Star blows up.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so we get to see both sides of it. They're people. They're humans. At the end of the day, really hope
Yes,
you,
absolutely. It's I really like how it digs into all that. It makes everybody so much more complex.
I really hope you weren't hearing that. You can't hear any of that.
A little, yeah.
Yeah, troublesome neighbors. But I get my
Oh.
revenge by doing shows at 4 in the morning with you guys. So it's nice that we brought up the mouse droid because very similar body shape.
Yeah.
Just add a dog head at the one end and a tail at the other end. So once again, some real world issues here. There weren't a lot of episodes to feature K9 while K9 was at the TARDIS, because very famously the prop, especially the prop for the K9 Mark 1, kept falling apart and breaking down. And so a lot of episodes, it was kind of a no-show, and they wrote it into the story that he's broken down and the Doctor and friends have to fix him to keep just to have him in the next episode,
Yeah.
sort of a thing. Also, in the first season, the machinery that was operating the computer inside the dog. The dog body was incredibly noisy and was very, very difficult for the actors to hear what the actors were saying. They fixed it with the K9 Mark II. It was literally a new model, not just in story. It was also in real life. And I just love that the creative ways they had to keep trying to put K9 in the show, because they wanted to have K9 there, but the prop kept breaking down, so they had to come up with these creative ways of keep having him in there. I don't know if you can see, but it has wheels at the bottom,
Okay.
the model. But a lot of the times the wheels just weren't working, so they had to devise these clever ways of just tying a rope to the robot's head and pulling him. Someone offset pulling the droid to make it look like he's actually rolling on wheels. There's one point where it was also incredibly difficult for the robot models to roll on natural surfaces like ground or grass or whatever. That's why most of his scenes were on sets. But there's a very, very famous example in The Stones of Blood, which was primarily shot outside on a grassy patches. What they did was they placed the model on this long sheet of tinfoil that they tried to hide under all the grass and dirt, and they just pulled the tinfoil without making it look too weird, like they're pulling the ground beneath him, to make the robot itself look like it's rolling on the ground.
Nice.
And then obviously, like I said, the technical issues that the prop itself suffered when they replaced the voice actor, and also even when they brought the voice actor back, he only had a few scenes in the first episode of that season before they staged the idea of the dog itself, because it's a dog. They were on the beach. Romana threw a frisbee or a bouncing ball, told him to fetch it, and the ball/frisbee made a little too close to the water, and the robot model got on the water and exploded. And that's how they got away with not having K9 on the show for at least 2 more episodes while the doctor fixed him. So I just loved all the creative ways of how they try to explain away K9 not being there, either to give the actors some time off or to just give the production crew time off from having to keep fixing it.
Yeah.
But speaking of problematic robots that constantly needed fixing, this is by far the most well-known and most recognized example. And I apologize in advance, the robot itself not very appealing to the eyes. Chameleon.
Ooh.
Okay, so producer at the time, John Nathan Turner, the guy who was so adamant to get K9 off the show because he was getting tired of keep having to fix it so they can keep having to have the character in the show. One day, he just decided to have a fully functioning humanoid robot character on the show that is fully articulated, fully capable of speech, and he wanted this character to be a full-on companion of the Doctor. Very famously, the prop itself was found in a junkyard, presumably left there after a movie production at the time was abandoned and discontinued. And so he brought the prop back into the studio. He got someone to fix it up and repair it and actually get it to work. Unfortunately, that person died shortly after completing the work on the robot itself. So there was no proper instruction manual on how to operate this machine. And so the robot itself made its first appearance in The King's Demons, thankfully a 2-parter, as opposed to the regular 4 or 5 or 6-parter episodes from the time. It was only a 2-parter at the very end of season 20, where it was originally a helper of the Master that the Master used to destabilize medieval England, I should say, because of the robot's innate ability to shapeshift. So basically, this horrible abomination of a robot that you see before you, how they got around with not really having the prop on hand at most of the time is they took advantage of the storyline ability of this robot to shapeshift into whatever the person next to it wanted. So basically, it was a very impressionable robot, meaning it forms an attachment to the nearest person standing in the room with it, and the person standing next to it can use his own thoughts and memories to make the robot change into whatever they want to, whatever they think of. And even the robot itself adapts the personality traits of whatever they were thinking of. I think I have here a GIF of the transformation.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So this is basically the effect of the robot prop changing into King John, played by Gerald Flood, who also provided the voice of the character outside of just playing the character of King John. And after eventually betraying the master, the robot prop joined the Doctor and friends in the TARDIS. And that, again, remember, that was the very end of season 20. The next time Doctor Who would come back would be the 20th anniversary special, The Five Doctors, which featured a brand new design for the TARDIS console, but no Chameleon. He was a complete no-show for that special, as well as the entirety of season 1, until showing up a couple of episodes before the season finale in the episode Planet of Fire, where it was revealed that his programming was corrupted. It was revealed that he spent the majority of the time connected to the TARDIS and doing some reworking on his own circuits and wiring at a room in the TARDIS that we never see before, which explained away how we never saw that robot again between the King's Demons and Planet of Fire. And the robot began to really lose its mind, taking on the familiar form of the Master, the Anthony Ainley Master, as well as Perry's stepfather, the new incoming companion, her stepfather. Again, that's how they got around not having the prop itself during the production of the show. But by the end of that episode, the robot, in story at least, was getting so wildly out of control that he begged the Doctor to destroy him, which the Doctor reluctantly did, using the Master's signature weapon, the tissue compression eliminator, shrinking down the robot until it exploded. Now, again, like I said, this prop caused so many problems on set, kept falling apart, and needed to be rebuilt. There were entire sections of existing episodes that were scrapped because they kept having to the prop itself kept falling apart during production, and it was really costing them production time. So, like, you show up with some of the actors mentioned that you show up for a scene involving Chameleon. You show up for the scene itself, the prop is standing in one place, a leg was over there, another arm was over there, like people frantically running around trying to fix the robot and figuring how to properly get it to work, until the entire scene was just canceled and they moved on to the next scene without Chameleon. So
Wow.
it was an incredibly problematic prop to work with. Now, obviously, with the benefit of audio adventures where you don't have to physically work with a prop, they brought the character back through in a trilogy on Big Finish, where they further explained, or rather further developed his character and explained more about his lore. He comes from a race of other androids called the Chameleons, who were constructed by a separate race called the Camille, who built these shape-shifting robots to send them to distant planets, integrate themselves into the population to study them, and before eventually showing up and conquering them. There was even this whole episode taking place inside a metaphysical plane, inside the sort of super brain, almost like the Matrix, the movie series, not the Matrix from Doctor Who, like a sort of Matrix type world of just these chameleons and all the races that they've conquered. So there was a lot of interesting potential for this robotic prop that unfortunately never really got off the ground, because the prop itself was so hilariously and famously unreliable. Now, unfortunately, the two people who were tasked with maintaining the robot prop itself also died in mysterious circumstances after their involvement with the prop. The actor Gerald Flood, who provided the voice of Chameleon, as well as in this scene playing the part of King John, also famously passed away shortly after this episode. The actor who played Perry's stepfather also passed away relatively shortly after the episode. Some of the writers of the show who wrote I think it was either Robert Holmes or Malcolm Hulk who wrote one of the episodes the Chameleon appeared in. He also passed away shortly after. John Nathan Turner, the producer, also passed away shortly after the show's cancellation. The master, Anthony Ainley, passed away in 2004. Almost every person who was ever associated with this prop passed away in tragic and mysterious circumstances, with the clear exceptions of Peter Davison, who played the Fifth Doctor, Nicola Bryant, who played Perry Brown, who also had interactions with the prop itself, and Mark Strickson, who played Vislo Turlo, who also was a companion of the Fifth Doctor at the time. These are the only three who survived the curse of this robot. Maybe it was a good idea that it was in a junkyard in the first place.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it was people should have seen it as a sign or something like that. But yeah, Peter Davison has said repeatedly that he very famously hated working with this prop on set, and his favorite memory of this prop is when he finally got to kill it, and any feelings of remorse or regret the Doctor features in that scene is just pure acting at its finest. So when Ben was here, whenever I brought up this stupid character in any episode, he always made references that how it looks like the Bicentennial Man, or that version of the Bicentennial Man.
Yeah.
But anything you want to add about this horrible atrocity of a robot prop?
The only thing that it made me think of was I have listened to the audio version of the biography written by Anthony Daniels, I Am C-3PO, and the crap that he went through to play that character, like the different kinds of costuming that he had to use, and like pieces everywhere, like it just made me think of what he had to go through. Even though it wasn't a prop, it was a costume, it was very similar in its malfunctioning and changing things up to get it to work and like all that kind of stuff.
It's a very complicated costume to wear with all the different parts around it.
Yeah,
that's why I think he might have been happier with the prequels because of the motion capture. It was motion capture. I'm not getting it wrong, right? Especially for the unfinished C-3PO in the first one, and
yeah, in the first one, but after that he was back in his suit.
Oh,
yeah. The suit was pretty standard. It changed the materials it was made out of, and it changed how it was connected together.
Did they still have these problems in the sequel trilogy, or does the book doesn't go that far?
He made it sound like he had a fantastic time in the sequel trilogy.
Okay.
So I think they had figured out most of the issues by then. But there were times in the original trilogy when they were very, first trying to figure it all out. And he's like, people would just kind of forget me, and I couldn't really go anywhere. I could like lean against something, but I couldn't sit down. And I was really hot because we were in the desert, and it just sounded miserable.
Oh,
but he's like, but he was so excited to be a part of, like, he fell in love with the character of C-3PO before he even got into the suit. Like, it's such a good book. Of course, I'm very partial to C-3PO. I love that character. But because I find him very relatable, actually. But yeah, totally see all the issues with that prop in all the issues that C3PO that Anthony Daniels had to deal with his costume.
Yeah, it's a very limiting costume because
Yeah.
famously there's this metallic line between
Yep.
this part of the arms. He can't move his arms too much, even when with the limited mobility. That's why C-3PO walks the way that he does.
Yeah.
It's because of the costume.
Yeah.
And I love that when these types of prop issues arise in Doctor Who, they make it a part of the character on screen. Like there's the famous case of the Sensorites, where basically all they do is just they wear face masks, and as a result, you can't see the actor's eyes. So all you'll see is just these holes where the eyes should be. So
Mhm.
they just wrote it into the character's biology that they don't have eyelids. Their eyes are open constantly all the time.
Oh.
So they can never close their eyes.
Uh-huh.
And obviously I mentioned endlessly about how they worked around the problems with K9. So whenever they had these, and also like the Sea Devils, where the person's head was around where the creature's neck was,
Mm.
and the mouth on the head barely moved, because every time they talked, you see the neck moving. So when they brought these characters to the modern series in the not the most recent episode, but the one before it, Legend of the Sea Devils, they made it so that their necks moves. That's where the gills are, and that's really where they're speaking from, as
Oh.
opposed to the mouth. So I suppose they just use the mouth to eat and the gills to speak, because you're in the original costume, the person's head was the neck.
Yeah.
So going back to
That's
Chameleon for just to
interesting.
finish off, I remember in an interview with Peter Davison, he says that John Nathan Turner walked up to him so happy and excited. He's like, "We're going to have the first ever fully robotic operating robotic character in television history." And he was so excited and happy. And Peter Davison, of course, had major doubts. I mean, this
Yeah.
interview was from the mid 2000s that he
Mhm.
talked about it, and he's like, we've barely figured out how to make operational robots on television nowadays. How the hell were you thinking about doing it in the mid 80s? Like we just did not have the technology back in the day. I mean, we saw all the problems with K9, even the Kildorian robots. They had it was a physical person in the suit. It wasn't a robot. So to go from that to making a fully operational robotic character that was a full-on companion character,
Yeah.
it's nuts. Like,
Yeah.
I admire the guy's ambition, but his ambition really was too much for the production company. And fair is fair. That season was not very good. It's one of the worst seasons in the show ever. But that is a story for another time. So I think we talked a lot about some cool robots from today. But next week I will also have Marie Wilson on as a guest again, talking about more modern robots. Obviously, we won't be discussing the modern appearances of K9 because we pretty much covered all the important parts here, but there are so many other good robots to talk about in the modern series. So, Miss Marie Wilson, where can people find you on the interwebs?
They can find me at Alia Morgaine on Twitter and Afra's Artifacts on YouTube, where I talk about the queer side of Star Wars.
And you can also find Marie Wilson and myself on the very last Geek Gauntlet on Taco's show, on Taco's channel, Something to Talk About. As for me, you can also find me on my own YouTube channel, 50 Shades of Geek. I do weekly reviews of every single Doctor Who episode from 1963 all the way to 2022. Right now, I believe, last I checked, I'm getting ready to wrap up season 3. And I think the last episode I uploaded, or maybe it's the next one I will, was the War Machines episode. So if not, it's pretty close to being uploaded. So check out that. You can also find me every Monday on this show, The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, and every Thursday with my good friend Soda on Fun with Flags, where we take turns and talk about our respective countries, Canada and Israel. And as I already mentioned, Taco's channel, you can also check out the other stuff on his channel, something to talk about. He does all kinds of Star Wars stuff. He did, I should say, a lot of Game of Thrones stuff, some Pokemon stuff. He did a lot of really great videos there, and it was truly an honor to be a part of his channel for as long as that channel ran. And speaking of being honored to be on other people's channels, I also got to bring up my good friend, the late, great Ben Rayner. His legacy lives on in the form of the Multiverse of Geekdom with Midnight and Dawn and Joe, who was also on this show last month, if I remember correctly, and Fido. They do all kinds of cool, crazy stuff on that channel, trying to keep the legacy of Ben Rayner alive. Also on this channel, trying to keep this channel afloat, we also have You Seen This with regular guests on the show, Snark, as well as Dave and Daniel. And speaking of soda, he also is about, I don't know if he's launched it already or he's about to launch a new wrestling show with his good friend Dagan, formerly from the Let's Get Ready Network. So there's really a lot of content on just this side of the YouTube sphere for everyone to check out and enjoy. So thank you all for watching if you have. And in the words of Missy herself, and yes, this is going to become a regular thing here, so get used to it. In the words of Missy herself,
don't forget to like and subscribe.
Goodbye.